If you've been gardening for any amount of time, I'm sure you've found yourself in the situation that I'm currently in. Whether you're saving plants off the clearance rack of the big box store or catching a tent sale like I just did on my way home from lunch. Sometimes we impulse buy plants and have to figure out what to do with them when we get home. And for those of you who know me, I'm a huge proponent in planning your garden. I actually have an entire course about planning your garden and making smart decisions. And with that said, I also feel like as a gardener and as a nurturer, we should still buy plants spontaneously sometimes. And I know that's like a bit contradictory, but hear me out. So sometimes your garden is just sort of getting stale, and adding some of these plants in throughout the season, it can, one, help you experiment with different plants that you may not have tried ever before, and two, it can kind of bring more life to your garden. So today I wanted to just bring you on the journey of how I actually prepare sort of dying plants before putting them in the ground, and show you the steps. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Amy. I'm from prettypurpledoor.com, and I help home gardeners create landscapes that are uniquely you. So today I just have a few things. I have a begonia nonstop orange, and in the center, I just love these. These are Gomphrena, and in the back, this is a perennial. So these are annuals. This one is a perennial. It's Agastache. Kudos Coral is the variety. So I came across these on my way home from lunch in sort of a buy one get one free or 50% off tent sale as they're closing for the season, and I thought, why not? So here I am, and as you can probably tell, some of these are looking a little ratty, so I have to take care of them a little bit before I put them in the ground. The very first thing that I would do in this situation, if you find yourself with a pile of plants that you don't really know too much about, is to do some research. So grab your phone, Google the names of the plants, and sort of just get an idea of how big they get, what kind of care they need, what kind of conditions do they like, just so that you could give them the best chance at surviving in your garden, because they're already struggling. So after you do that research and you figure all of that out, you'll have to go around your garden, figure out where you're going to put them, obviously. I already have spots for these, so I'll show you where they're going to end up. But the next step that I'm going to do is actually cut off any of this dead or dying foliage here. So I'm just going to, I don't even need gloves for this part, but you could see here, so on these begonias, there's a lot of dying foliage. So I'm just gonna, I have these trimmers, and I'm just gonna cut off anything that's sort of dead or dying or not looking super hot. And I'll throw this stuff in my compost bin when I'm done here. And you can be pretty brutal at this point. By cutting off some of the dead things, you're gonna give it a better chance of actually establishing. So yeah, so I'm just gonna go through these. I'll probably speed this part up. The next step that I always do, I've heard it called bubbling before. I don't know if there's a proper term for this, but I just basically am going to soak them in a bucket of water. And I've heard some people say, oh, soak them under the water for 24 hours and things like that. I've never tried that because it just sounds kind of dangerous, especially if the plants that you're planting don't necessarily like wet conditions and wet roots. You can do a lot of damage. So what I do is I keep them in their nursery pot, and I put them under water, and I just wait for the water to stop bubbling. So I don't know if you can see it, but it's bubbling right now. And basically it has to be completely submerged, the entire pot. And once those bubbles go away, that means that the water has gotten to the root of the plant. So that's really as far as I go with it. So I'm going to do that bubbling for all of these plants and make sure that the root ball is getting submerged, because likely they're on sale and they look dead, because most cases it's because they weren't watered properly or they were put in a condition like a full sun condition when they need shade. The other reason sometimes is that they're just past their prime, and if it's a perennial you can wait till next year. If it's an annual, you're kind of out of luck. But I found that most annuals will kind of come back, they'll spring back from it, and as long as you're in an area where it's not going to frost for quite a while, you'll be okay. But yeah, if it's dry at all, it'll benefit from this dunking or bubbling. So I'm just going to go through and make sure that every single plant gets a really good drink. Finding these plants on clearance, I just think it's a great way to sort of experiment with new things that you may not have chosen if you came to the garden center with a big plan. But if you've been through my course or you read any of my blog posts, I think you're probably pretty good at understanding like what types of plants to look for, and you probably have a color scheme in mind. So as long as you stick with those basic techniques that you learn on my website or in my course, then choosing just sort of extras to fill in spots, it's a great way to, like I said, experiment. It's also great if you have just planted a lot of perennials and they're still really young and you're feeling like your garden isn't full, it's not filled in. Adding some annuals can really help, and it can really be that thing that changes every year in your garden to make it look a little bit different. Okay, so everything is bubbled in, and now I'm going to actually go out and plant them in the front. So why don't you come with me? Okay, so I'm out in the front yard now, and I'm really sorry about the sun. It's quite sunny still. I often get the question of, I want a list, or can you tell me how to plant X, or tell me how to plant Y, or can you tell me how you plant plugs versus, large perennials versus annuals. And, my answer is I do it all the same. I'm not really doing anything different. So I'm going to plant these sort of injured plants the same exact way that I plant anything else in my garden. I keep it simple. So this is how I do it. Everything I plant, this is exactly how I do it. I dunk them in the water, just like I showed you. And then I use a biotone, which is Biospoma. It's a really good starter plant food. It'll never burn a plant. And then I have a bag of compost over there, and I will add a sort of a top dressing on top of my plants and maybe mix a little bit into the hole. Okay, so I just take a handful of this biotone and I drop it right in the hole. Maybe I'll take 2 because I'm going to plant a couple in here. And then I'll take just a handful of compost, and I'm just gonna kind of work this in. I have to find a place to put some of this dirt so I can actually plant. So what I do is make the hole twice as wide, but the same depth as the pot. So you have our pot here, just have to make sure that it's deep enough. And here's some of the soil from the original hole. And I'm just gonna throw you in here, my little Gomphrena. And then I just kind of tuck it in. I don't like step on it or do anything like that. I do pank the soil down, and once you water this in, the soil might sink a little bit again, so you might have to put a little bit more soil in for it. It says to plant these 9 to 12 inches apart. I'm putting them closer. I'm curious to see what happens if they still grow nice and I get like a bigger massing effect. That's sort of what I'm going for here. So that's why I'm planting so closely. I don't really care for it when people space them out and there's huge gaps. My goal is to get every single inch of the ground completely covered with plants and natural materials so that I don't have a need for mulch and I don't have a need to really weed that much because it's sort of taking care of itself already. Okay, so that's really it for planting some plants that are on death's door. I plant them the same way as everything else other than the beginning few steps, and here's just where I put everything. I'll give you a quick tour. Okay, so again, here we are with the Gomphrena in the front bed, and they're really close. Again, I've never planted this. It's brand new to me, so I don't really know. But, you know, that's the thing about experimenting in the garden. Nothing is permanent, and if they get a little too close together, I'll just move some of them. I'll spread them out. So I'm not too worried about it. Here's some of my front beds here. And this is where I ended up putting the begonia, because I know they need some shade. So I just sort of tucked them back here. And then over here, just sort of a side bed I have. These smell so pretty, these agastache. It's like a mountain mint, it's called, but it is a wonderful smelling plant. Here's a piece up close. And I'm really frustrated with myself because I had to buy, they were buy one, get one free, so I only bought 2. So I actually pulled a little tiny piece off and stuck it in between, and I'm hoping that I can get a division off of that, because I don't really like to plant in even numbers. And again, I don't know how big these are gonna get for real for now. I think they're fine. As the hydrangea grows, I may have to move these again, but I'm okay with that. I'm all about experimenting, trying new things, and I think you should too. So hopefully you'll get out there and get some sale plants and put them in the ground and see what other new things you can grow, and I'll see you over in the next video. Bye. See my shadow.